Our friend Cindy Lucin says, how is it possible to support law enforcement officers yet still be in favor of reducing the size and scope of government interactions with individuals? Help. I need to explain this conflict to a few people. Well, no one had a problem supporting Andy Taylor, right? You might have gotten some complaints about Barney Fife throwing his weight around, but that's not really going to hurt anybody. But is there anybody who really thinks that there's a problem with Andy Taylor, sheriff of Mayberry, played by Andy Griffith? I don't think so. So let's just start from this principle. It's not the number, it's the nature of the police force. And the simple answer, the quick answer, Cindy Lou, is just simply say this. If it turns out we need more police protection, then okay. But they have to come in at the lowest possible level. That's really the answer to solving the police state issue, is bring them in at the lowest possible level, closest to the people, and make sure that their power and their financing is independent of the next higher police authority. So in other words, if Mayberry needs a second sheriff, hire a second sheriff. But for God's sakes, don't take an FBI guy or federal marshal and don't invite the feds in there. Just hire another sheriff. And then maybe you're subordinate to the governor of the state, and then he's subordinate to the president in case of dire national emergency. But basically, keep it low. Keep it low and keep it dispersed. And that's what the Constitution's designed to do. That's the whole theory of the Constitution. Everybody talks about the separation of powers between legislative, executive, and judicial, but the real separation of powers is between federal, state, and local. That's where the power separation is. By the way, Victoria just said, we're all Milo. And you know what? That is a damn brilliant idea, Victoria. You know why? Seriously, what we should do is this. We should just get a bunch of people together and have this group of 5 or 6, 7 people tweet for him. He writes it and sends it to us, and we tweet it. And we say, this is from a friend. FAF, from a friend, FAF. And then what are they going to do? They're going to ban all of us too? How do they know? How would they prove it? What if I started writing a couple of tweets that sounded like Milo, but wasn't Milo? You can beat these people, but you got to be clever about it, and you have to understand what they're doing. Now, this idea that Victoria raised, that we're all Milo, frankly, if Milo were to write a tweet and have it tweeted out by 30 or 40 conservatives, or 200, he wouldn't have the following that he had immediately, but they would be linked together. So I think it's an actually really interesting idea. Anyway, back to the police issue. You can't. You have to look at what is the actual problem with the police state, and the problem with the police state is that they have coercive power over everybody's life. They get to tell people what to do based on a very small number of people or one person at the top of the pyramid. That's why the Gestapo was so terrifying, because they could do anything and get away with anything, and there was no one to stop them. The Gestapo was reported directly to Himmler. Himmler reported directly to Hitler. And if Hitler wanted something done, then or somebody persecuted, then the Gestapo would do it. And then if they had to bring people in and torture them to death or kill a few thousand of them, then they would. So what you want to do is you want to break up the coercive lever. You still need the lever of coercion. Every time I say something about libertarians, I'm constantly told that that's not libertarianism, but there needs to be laws, and people need to obey the laws. And some people don't obey the laws, and then you have to have somebody to go and enforce the laws. So I don't think there's any question about needing a police force. This idea that we don't to me is a utopianism. Utopian as communism is. People cheat. Some people do. Some people are criminals. Rest of us need to be protected from these predators, losers. So if we need more police, bump them down. And what police we have should be bumped down. I know you can't do neighborhood policing everywhere, but I mean, in terms of the practicality of it, squad cars and all the rest, as opposed to the cop who walked the beat. And this is the example of the kind of policing that we talk about as being effective, where it's a guy who grew up in this neighborhood. He grew up in this corner of Brooklyn, and he decided to become a cop. and now he walks around the block that he grew up on. He knows everybody by name. He knows when somebody's out of place. He knows when somebody's guilty. He knows when somebody's been broken into. He knows all the victims. He knows all the people. They trust him because he's one of theirs. And if a crime occurs, they'll tell him, and they'll give him leads. Let's just use that as the model, because that model actually did work on a lot of circumstances. Now, if that's the case, how do you apply that local neighborhood policing to the modern world? Well, I think what you have to do is you have to do what that tremendous police chief said, and that is just go to these Black Lives Matter protesters and say, if you don't like it, put on a uniform. Come on, put on a uniform. In that way, I'm not saying you recruit policemen from Black Lives Matter, but you can recruit them from the people just below them in terms of the grievance ladder. Make them live up to their, rhetoric. A couple people were calling for like little mini states. Some people had said we should have a little black state that's completely independent of white America, and then other people have said we should have neighborhoods of the entire country. You shouldn't have any police at all. If you get enough people together like that, I'm tempted to just say, go ahead and try it. Great, knock yourself out. Here's the border. Here's the border of your little sovereign territory, and no policeman will go in there, and no firemen either. It's all yours. So good luck. Sometimes this is one of the reasons why we get into such trouble, is because the effects and the causes are so separated. If somebody actually had a chance to try this idea of a neighborhood without police, we'd get to find out very quickly whether or not this idea worked. But that's never going to happen. So, Cindy, you can take to the degree that we already have a police state. The answer is to break it down and disconnect the pieces. You could conceivably make a case that you need the pieces together for intelligence gathering services. If you had a high enough level case and you had actual Fourth Amendment protections and you had judges looking at the evidence and trying to decide whether or not there's probable cause for a wiretap or whatever, those pathways I can see staying open, but none of the authority pathways, none of the funding pathways. So many of these local police departments have these, like armored vehicles, and one of the reasons they have them is because the federal government says, do you want one? We've got $200,000 that we have to spend somewhere, so it's either you or we just pitch the money into the ocean. So all of this stuff is connected again, and it's all got to change. But ultimately, it's nice to go to the model. Now, the model's not the ideal, because ideals don't exist in the world. But the model is Andy Taylor. He's the model. And the reason he's the model is because he is not a violent or vicious man. He's as good a man as they could possibly get. He knows everybody in the town, and the real reason that the Andy Taylor model works so well is because he knows everybody, and because he's got such a strong sense of right and wrong, and he's so strong as character morally. He usually almost never has to use the weapon. I don't think I've ever seen him draw his gun in that show. So I understand that's a fantasy of small America. I do. I'm not that naive. I know you can't do that with a city with 13 million people. I get all of that. But as a model, as a goal, this should be where we're headed. We should be heading to a world where we are paying people from the neighborhoods that they will patrol. And I don't know how you do anything better than that. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to repeat that name only because I can't read it, but somebody said we need an all-conservative state. We're heading that way. This country is starting to, you can start to see some gaps in the seams here. I think if they tried to do, I was talking with Jeremy earlier today, and he said if Hillary tries to pull a comprehensive gun ban like they had in Australia, Texas is out of there. They're done. They're just out. And I think a lot of states would be interesting. We may end up there, and if that's the case, then I'll move, because I'm pretty sure that Confederation of Conservative States is not going to include California. Although, as I've said many times, we'd only need about 15 people with AR-15s that conquer the entire state. We wouldn't even have to shoot. We could just walk down the streets with them, strapped over our shoulder, and they'd panic and start to cry and be done in a week. Okay.